What's up, YouTube? Welcome to this second part of this series where we are learning about de-escalation and use of force course as a tactical security. And in the last video, which was the first one of this series, I have given you the helicopter view of what we are going to talk about in the next videos. So here we are. And just to reiterate, we have looked into a course of de-escalation and use of force, where we also have multiple sections, which started off with MORE, which stands for Management of Resistive Behavior. Then we looked into criminal codes, which tells us like what we can and cannot do as tactical security. Then we looked into restraint programs, which gives us the ways to deal with resistive and violent person. And lastly, we also looked at, we will learn about defenses against the sharp-edged objects to save ourselves, the public, and the subject itself. So as I said in the last video, I will cover each one of these section in a separate video. So in this one, I will cover management of resistive behavior. So let's begin. Let me grab the pen real quick. So in order to manage, oops, I dropped the pen. I'm so sorry about that. In order to manage the resistive behavior, we try to prevent conflict. We try to prevent the conflict at the first place by using verbal and non-verbal strategies. So you might ask, what are the verbal and non-verbal strategies? So to begin, verbal strategies are not what we say, but how we say it. And I know this is a quote for one of a person, but I don't know his or her name, so I leave it on you. So, but whatever we say, it should depict compassion, professionalism, and respect towards the other person. And then the non-verbal strategies. So as you can say to yourself, that non-verbal strategies are our body language. It includes our arm position and our stance. So our arms should never be crossed, it should not be in the pockets, and our stance, it's not like looking somewhere else, it should be straight into the eyes of the subject. Yeah. So although we have these techniques in our arsenal, but there might be cases that you can't stop crises to happen. So in that case, we have some indicators that suggest that a crisis is about to happen. And if we dive deep into those indicators, then just wait a moment. So now we have indicators of crises. So the first indicator is that when the other person starts to scream or start to yell, then you can say that a crisis is about to happen. Second, when you see the person starting physically acting out, I leave the spelling on you. And then number three, when you see that there is a change in the skin tone of the subject. And just to give you an example, which my instructor have given to me, the black and brown people. So the skin of black and brown people will turn much darker, darker. And oops, sorry about that. And those who are white, their skin tone will turn reddish, will turn reddish. And number three, oh sorry, number four, when you see the other person is starting to fidget. And number five, you see that the other person is showing you aggressive gestures. So if any of this happens, then you can say that a crisis is about to happen. So the crises are divided into multiple stages, and each stage has its own response, which we are going to look at next. So I hope you are liking my drawing as well on the way. So now we have the stages, and we also have the responses. Stages and responses to crises. So the first stage is anxiety. So whenever you see there is a change in the perceived behavior of the subject, you can say that the anxiety stage has kicked in. Whenever there is a change in the perceived behavior of the subject. And in response to that, we become supportive by using phrases such as I am here to help you, or by using phrases such as I can understand what you are going through. Okay, so there might be a case that this is not a stage where the other person is, so he might be in second stage, which is defensive. So defensive stage is when the person start to challenge our authority, or the other person start to become restrained towards us, or when the other person loses his or her rational thought. So when this happens, then we respond the other person. Oops, what the fuck? So when the other person loses his rational thought. So when this happens, we so when this happens, in response to this, we give them directive orders, and we use phrases such as I want you to sit down, or I want you to not yell, phrases like this. And now, the third stage, which is of physically acting out. You can say that this stage has kicked in when the other person loses his or her physical control and start to harm themselves, the staff, or the property. We can say that this stage has kicked in when any of this happens. And in response to this, we apply physical restraints. Physical restraints. So these are the techniques that are designed and intended to control the physical actions of the subject. And we can use handcuffs, bed restraints. In case you are in hospital, then bed restraints are what we apply. As in this my case, we can use baton or any type of physical force which is reasonable and necessary. So this is really, really, really important. The force you apply should be reasonable and necessary. And then the fourth and last stage, which is of tension reduction. This is a stage that we want the other person should be in as soon as possible. So in this stage, the person regain the control over his or her body and thoughts. And as soon as the other person arrives in this situation, we begin to have restorative interaction with the other person. So, as I said earlier, as soon as a person arrives in this stage, which is of tension reduction, we, as soon as we we apply, as I said earlier, as soon as the person arrives in this stage, which is of tension reduction, we begin restorative interaction with the person. And lastly, these are designed and intended to de escalate the heat of the moment. So, yes, guys, these are the four stages and the responses to that. It's a little like a hill, but I hope you are understanding it. So guys, what I have observed that this video is taking longer than I expected. So what I will do is that I will divide the part 2 into two parts. So whatever I have told you here will be part 1, and in the next video I will tell you about the goals and the barriers to effective communication and the things to keep in mind while having conversation with anyone, maybe your friends, your family, or your significant other. So, just to reiterate this video, we have looked at in order to manage resistive behavior, we try to prevent conflict by using verbal and non-verbal strategies. And it is not that what we say, it's like how we say it. That's more important. And it, in non-verbal strategies, that include our body language, like our arm position. As I said earlier, it should not be in pocket, it should not be crossed, and our stance. We should look directly in the eye of the other person. And then we looked into indicators of crisis because there will be many possibilities and many situations where you cannot stop a crisis to happen. But we can always look into these things and say that a crisis is about to happen and be well prepared for that. So when you see other person start to scream or yell, when you see that the other person is about to physically acting out, when you see there is a skin change tone, when there is a change in skin tone, when you see the other person is fidgeting, and when you see that there are aggressive gestures from the other person towards you or towards the staff or towards anyone. Then there are stages and responses. So first stage is anxiety. Whenever you see that there is a change in the person's perceived behavior, as soon as you see this, we start to give supportive response, which in which we use phrases like "I am here to help," "I can understand what you are trying to do and what you are going through." And second stage is defensive, when the other person start to challenge our authority over them, or when he or she start to lose his or her rational thought. This stage kicks in, and in response to that, we become directive. We just order them to do what we want them to do. And the third stage is physically acting out, when the other person start to lose his or her control, they start to freak out. That's when this stage kicks in, and in response, we apply physical restraints, either handcuffs, bed restraints, batons, or use any type of physical force, either our hands. But that should be reasonable and necessary. That's more important. And the last stage is tension reduction. As a tactical guard, we want the situation to be in tension reduction as soon as possible. So, in tension reduction, the person starts to regain his or her control over his body and thoughts, and as soon as the other person arrives, we start restorative interaction with them. And these are designed and intended to de escalate the situation as soon as possible, as I said. So, yep, this is the second part, actually, the part 2.1 of management of resistive behavior. And in the next part, we will talk about goals and barriers of communication and some more things. So I hope this helps. Done.